All right. Welcome to yet another episode of Dynamic CIO Talk Show. We do understand these are very challenging and tough times and are testing the patience, perseverance, and the potential of people across genre and across geographies. The year 2020 was unexpectedly, or if I may say so, surprisingly unprecedented, and that continues to surprise us even almost halfway into 2021. While we are fighting a very unique battle on the health front, it has taught us to think on our feet while all else was changing around us due to the COVID 19 pandemic. Undoubtedly, it is the technology that has come for the rescue of humanity and society, besides many other things. It is a well known fact that those organizations that were digitally transformed were much better equipped to respond changes during those who are just totally unawares. COVID-19 has turned digital transformation from a nice to have to a must have requirement for most organizations, forcing them to adapt and modernize quickly in order to keep their organizations running and provide the customers an experience that they look for. While digitization may seem like a daunting task for some, the pandemic has made it clear that a sound business strategy demands identifying digital transformation opportunities and get those initiatives underway very quickly. To get a perspective on how the corporates and businesses made this turnaround possible, we have the pleasure of having with us today Sarajit Jha. Sarajit is the Chief of Business Transformation and Digital Solutions at Tata Steel. Previously, he has worked as Chief Digital Value Acceleration, Chief of Corporate Strategy. He has earned his MBA from Xavier Institute of Management and has a bachelor's degree from Presidency College. Joining me in this conversation is my colleague and co-host, Smruti Gandhi, and we are going to discuss about the heightened importance of digital transformation in the changing times. Welcome to the show, Sarajit. How are you doing?
I'm good. I hope it's likewise for all of you, and thanks for having me.
Thank you very much. Okay, so without further delay, let's begin this conversation.
March 2020 was the time when lockdown was announced first, and that's when the company started recalibrating their technology infra, and tried to align it with the phenomenon called, the new work from home, or the new normal as we call it. Digitization was the key to business resilience during this period, and the pandemic just accelerated the digital transformation. How do you see this shift, and what were the important lessons that were learned by the industries?
I think that's a very good question. It's always good to kind of look back in retrospect, as long as you don't, fall kind of victim to the fact that everything is 2020 with hindsight. But I would say a couple of things. I think first is the organizations that came into the pandemic having made the investments for digital, because digital costs money and digital takes some time to do, clearly benefited a lot more because they were able to reach out to customers. They were able to keep their employees safe. They were able to work from home more seamlessly than the others. So while a lot of companies were struggling to figure how to keep themselves afloat, some companies were being able to help others to stay afloat, and typically in terms of credibility, in terms of competency, in terms of capital deployment, those companies did better. Secondly, let's take our case. When we came into the pandemic, we are a process industry. You have to run it 24/7. Suddenly there were lockdowns. Customers were not buying, and we were down to, for the first time, I remember a comment that we were measuring sales in kgs, which we have not done for 113 years of our existence. And at that point, what was done is teams worked very hard for the first 7 days. It was very important to keep our oxygen, plants and utilities running. For example, you've seen what's happening in the country across, in oxygen, and you know that steel plants are kind of cutting themselves to supply the oxygen to. And at that time, we were making sure that the oxygen plants are working and alive, because we needed the oxygen to keep ourselves running. And the other thing that happened was that we quickly pivoted to China as an industry. You would have seen how all the steel majors started selling in the export market because the domestic market was shut down. Third thing what that happened was that we had to keep all our workers safe. So we had a Suraksha worker platform where we were able to do track and trace, we were able to do social distancing, we were able to do face mask detection using AI. We were able to cover a lot of our routes. We created an entire maps on Google because shutdowns were happening, and how do you reroute your materials and critical spares through the least amount of friction pathways. We were making new alliances. I remember that initially in the pandemic, Jamshedpur town was locked down, and we tied up with Zomato and Swiggy to connect the supply chain of the vegetable growers and outside of the town to the people in the town, because that supply chain had broken down. So those were, I think it was all about using digital. It was all about being agile, and it was all about being very caring and compassionate about what you do towards all stakeholders. And I don't think that has changed. Those are three eternal things which will be there for the next 10, 20, 25 years. What would get added to it is that we need to make a more sustainable planet. Otherwise, we may not have one as we know it today.
If you are now able to hear me, it's a fascinating explanation that you have given in the beginning. If we talk about Tata Steel, how would you kind of evaluate, and how would you describe your preparedness from the time the lockdown happened and till today? What were some of the top priorities that you had fixed, and now progressing into the future? What's the plan that you envisage?
So Tata Steel in digital and in any response never believes that it has done all that it could or all that it should. It is really we always believe it is for others and history to judge us. But what I can share with you is that Gartner, which was doing a study of the 1,800 companies, large companies who had given the best possible response to the pandemic, we were in the top 6 percentile as per their evaluation. So we must have gotten some things right. And I would say that a crisis has always brought a company which is 113 years, the crisis brings the best in us. And the way people, to me, it was not so much about the tools and technologies. It was all about the way people came together, how they went beyond the call of duty, how we managed to run our towns and remote operations and support the communities in those areas, how the CSR department of Tata Steel quickly set up an entire, the migrant workers are coming and providing them food and shelter. How, as we said, we tied up with Swiggy and Zomato to get capabilities we did not have to provide to the town. How we worked with the district administration and saw that the administration had a lot of hidden talent, and how those people could step up, and it was a joy to see a lot of that. So to me, I think many of those things were the main takeaways. And somebody says that the two statements I'm very fond of. One is borrowed, which is that there is no, that culture will eat strategy for breakfast. And the second one is what I truly believe, that there is no vaccine for climate change. So similarly, there is no vaccine for for crisis management. You just need to do what has to be done, and do it together, do it in a collaborative fashion, and be extremely humble and sensitive about it.
As you said, Sarajit, that, what you said is right. There's no vaccine for crisis management. So the crisis management was handled. What were some of your new innovations or any use cases that emerged to enable the digital experiences, that are powered by the emerging tech, such as, artificial intelligence, machine learning, IoT, or any other?
So I think the first and the basic was that Tata Steel was moving very aggressive to the cloud, and 85% of our addressable workloads are already in the cloud. And as a result, we could move to work from home very seamlessly. In fact, as the second pandemic struck, all our offices have again gone on work from home, though we are a manufacturing company. The second thing is that we were using data for a long time, and we have a lot of read capability onto our data. So most of our data and operations we can see from far. We don't have what is called write capability into the data yet, which is our ability to run those operations from far. So, but within the plants, the operators are not sitting next to the machines. The operators are sitting in control towers, And now many of those control towers are getting centralized or going dark, which means that they see all the operations through video and not through the glass that was traditionally the way it was. So, that's been a natural progression that's happened over a period of time. And the face mask detection was an AI-enabled case. We are able to quickly see if 10 or more people are aggregating in any location in vast amount in area in our plant, which is a IoT-led case, because we have those Suraksha cards and the beaconing device, and we have geo-fenced our plants. We had so I told you a cloud use case, I told you a data use case, and a visualization use case, and I told you an IoT use case. And then there was a supply chain use case, which I was saying that we were able to map all our supplies onto the geo map of India, and we were able to route our supplies the way it was. And last but not the least, we made all our contract tracing touchless. So all the material which was coming into the plant, all the GST, e-invoice, etc., they all went digital. So there was no need for touch or paper as goods were moving in and out of the plant. And it's very large quantities, right? If you were making about 20 million tons of steel like we do, you're literally moving about 140 million tons of steel and material, and that's like huge.
We are still not out of the pandemic, and in fact, the second wave is even more deadly and devastating. What do you think the plans made in 2020 are again redundant, or would they need some more fine tuning? And where do you see, what is the roadmap for the future?
So what I saw was that, as a society, as an industry, as a society, we had two things. We had pandemic fatigue, and we also started believing largely into a narrative that there was either herd immunity or that India had licked the pandemic, etc. Facts that have borne out not to be true, and all of us as individuals and as a society, as a country, are I would say, paying a fairly heavy price for it. But there were two things that we saw. One was our ability to, many of those tools which were being used extensively in the pandemic, to be fair, had fallen into disuse. Many of there was a gravity towards business as usual, which is very usual for human beings. Our ability to get those tools back into circulation was fairly rapid, because they had not been decommissioned. They were just not being adopted and adapted with the same vehemence that was being exercised pre the pandemic. So I think that's one bucket. The other is, I don't think we need any new tools. I think we need a lot more usage of the tools that have already been built, and maybe new adaptations of those tools for use cases which may emerge in the second one. For example, one clear area is vaccination. And one of the tools that we have built is to track vaccination for all the people in our company, who has taken a first dose, who has taken a second dose, who is eligible for vaccination but not going for it. And we have continuous alerts and continuous monitoring and reviewing. And I think, at least as a company and as a person, I believe in two things. One, what gets measured gets done. What gets measured and reported gets better. That's kind of been our unsaid DNA for almost 113 years.
I like what you just said. What about measured and reported? I think it's a very good takeaway, not only in terms of digital experience, in terms of, how to work. Adding to what you just said, and adding to my question of the second wave, even in the first wave and the second wave, a lot of new concepts have been emerging. One of the new concepts that has been emerging is physical plus digital. Do you think in a manufacturing company like Tata Steel, it will work, and how?
Well, I think whether you call it as digital, as somebody calls it, or phygital, as some people call it, or bridgital, as our chairman likes to call it, I think all of those terms are the only way the future is going to be. Because if you look at it, and you look at it from a base point, one of the things that struck me was that it's very difficult to scale concepts. So vaporware is the most difficult thing to scale. Things like, say, Atmanirbhar Bharat or Swachh Bharat are actually concepts. Those are the most difficult to scale. The next most difficult thing to scale is atoms and molecules, because you're not going to make a digital steel plant. You're going to bring intelligence into a steel plant using digital means, and the easiest to scale is bits and bytes. Somehow the conversation always is from bits and bytes to atoms and molecules to concepts. It just has to be the reverse. If even anybody who has dealt with the challenges of change management 101 would understand that. And that's why I always say that, if you were to make if you're trying to make transformation, one of the first things I say is, just imagine that, look, if you were to go to a caterpillar and say you're going to transform into a butterfly, he will either freeze to death or die of laughter. Those are the only two things that are going to happen. So you need to have the ability to tell that person that, look, first, आप cocoon बन के सुकून से सो जाइए. So just, become a cocoon and, sleep in peace. Then go into cryogenic sleep. Then you tell him that, look, now you wake up and see, you might see something in the back. Don't get too, worried about it. And you say, why don't you just move your shoulder muscles a bit? And then when he sees that it's flapping, you say, I'll flap it a little faster. And he feels the wind, and don't tell him anything. Then take him to the edge and just push him, and he'll start flying. So that's the way to do it. And it's got to be broken into those simple steps. Otherwise, we will, be talking very large concepts. And I once heard someone telling me, because I am a generalist, that, he told me something. He said, Sarajit, I generally don't like general things. And I think that comment has really struck with me.
I think you put the digital transformation and all the concepts that I said in a very simple way, of how the cocoon to butterfly. I think it explains it in a very simple and it looks very simple, and it's still not simple, but you put it in a very simple way.
No, it is simple. It is not easy. I think it's very important to make that distinction in life, that most things are simple. And there is a lot of debate in that. And I think I'm on the Einstein side, which says that things can be only as simple as they are, not any simpler, which is correct. But on the other hand, things don't need to be more difficult than they already are.
Okay, let me attempt to ask the last question, if I am audible. So finally, digitization will shift gears as we move ahead. What, according to you, will be some of the changes that the industry's digital leaders should anticipate? How should they be prepared for those changes?
I think number one change is what we have been experiencing, Rahul, which is lack of connectivity. So as you can see, even a simple thing like a Zoom call has been made into a bit of guessing, and, Smruti having to kind of time when she enters and when, she exits. So that's kind of the first thing that has to be sorted for digital, which is connectivity. India is 22% fiber. China is 80% fiber. China is adopting 5G. India is still experimenting with 5G. 4G adoption in India is not complete. And we have BSNL, which still is struggling with 4G equipment and deciding where it should get what from. So I think that's the first thing that needs address. Second is capability building. You are not going to be a digital company unless you have digital workers. And it's important that you really train your workers onto digital, and that the change migration is done in a humane manner, but with the urgency that it demands and commands. The third thing I would say is that the uncertainty, the so-called volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, the VUCA world that PwC termed in the late 90s, I think that's going to express itself in various ways. And what is today called anti-fragility by, I think, BCG, which is beyond resilience. You need to set up the organization as an amoeba. It needs to be autonomous. It needs to be self-forming. It needs to have, it needs to be distributed. People really have to start thinking about their business model in that fashion, particularly starting with their supply chains. And last but not the least, I think scenario building, scenario planning is very important, because somehow we go with point predictions, and we have overall a philosophy that bad things don't happen to good people. But I think that has been that kind of hypothesis has been put to rest, I guess.
Great. Thank you very much. It was a very, as Smruti also commented, you explained things in a very simplistic way. I'm sure the things are not, they are not as simple. Or you said they are simple, they're not easy. True. So thank you very much for your inputs. Thank you for talking to Dynamic CIO, and wish you a very good day.
Thank you, Rahul. Thank you, Smruti. And stay safe, stay blessed. And if anybody watches this, take a vaccine, wear a mask, do social distancing, and there is no better friend at the moment than common sense. And be kind of look deep inside yourself, take a few breaths, and be motivated. I know it's difficult. It's not simple or easy, but it just has to be done. Thank you so much.
Thanks
Thank
for this.
you.
Thank you very much.